Well, it's good to be with you, everybody. Pastor Steve here, and I'm thankful you've joined me for today's devotion. In our Bible reading plan, we are in Genesis 47. And as you're opening your Bible there, just want to say a word. It's near the end of March 2025, and before we can blink, it'll be 2026. And I want to say something to all of you, to each of you who are in a D group here at First Baptist. Will you begin praying today? I mean, right now, this day, that over the next few months, God will show you individuals who need to be in a discipleship group, who need to be in a D group, who need to grow in their walk with Christ. Maybe it's somebody who is kind of a fringe attendee or member at First Baptist, someone who comes pretty regularly, but that's all they do. They're not involved beyond that. And in all likelihood, it will be people you don't know right now. So I'm asking you here at the end of March to be praying for God to show you people so that you can begin talking to them. Sometimes it takes multiple conversations, months ahead, speaking to them for God to prepare their heart to be in a D group. If you wait, let's say we want to start new groups in January of 26. If you wait until October, November, December, it's challenging because you've waited too late. So start praying now and begin talking to people. It takes time sometimes for them to warm up to the idea, giving room or space for God to speak to their hearts. So start praying today and then keep praying and start looking for people and asking God to show you people to be in a new D group with you next year. All right, Genesis 47, Joseph made Pharaoh, who was already wealthy and powerful, even more wealthy and more powerful. And every time I read this story, I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I struggle a little bit with what Joseph did, how he went about it. On the other hand, I think, wow, how smart was he? And he did his job, executed his responsibilities as number two in charge in Egypt. He did his job very, very well. And I don't know what to say about it beyond that. The other comment I want to make before sharing my devotional thought is the Jewish people, when they moved, Jacob and his descendants, when they moved to Egypt, lived in the land of Goshen, which is part of Egypt. And it's if you're looking at a map, it would be to your right and up. It would be to the northeast corner of Egypt, not far from the Mediterranean and those tips of the Red Sea and all, and in the direction of going back up to Canaan and the Promised Land. So that's where they're living all these years, taking care of their flock. Now, devotionally, what spoke to me are verses 8 and 9. So let's look at that for a moment. Verse 8, Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many years have you lived?" And so Jacob answers the king, the Pharaoh of Egypt, "The years of my sojourning are 130. So I'm 130 years old at this point. And notice what he says, "Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life." Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life, nor have they attained the years that my fathers lived during the days of their sojourning. Those verses to me are very sad. I mean, they just are. Pharaoh asked him, "How old are you?" And he says, "I haven't lived nearly as long as my dad and granddad, few years, and unpleasant. I mean, it's a very sad, even you might say pessimistic or negative answer. Few. He was 130 years old. We learned later in this chapter he lived another 17 years in Egypt, so he's 147 when he died. And you and I would say, that's not few, that's a long time. But his father, Isaac, lived to be 180. So that's 33 years more than Jacob lived. And his grandfather, Abraham, lived to be 175. So that's 28 years more than Jacob or Israel. So in a sense, in comparison to them, and that's what he's saying here, he didn't live as long as they did. But the part that really got me was not that, it was the unpleasant. He said, my years have been unpleasant. And I think in some ways, Jacob's attitude was affected by the challenges and the hardships he endured during his lifetime. Think about it for a moment. He, from early on, was in a family where mom and dad played favorites. There was conflict between him and his brother, his twin, Esau, and he even took advantage of his brother. Manipulated his elderly father into receiving the blessing that was intended for Esau. Spent 20 years away from home. Okay, he had to flee so Esau wouldn't kill him. Spent 20 years away from home, living with relatives up in what would today would be Syria, Turkey, the northwest part of Syria, the south, the eastern part of Turkey, if you will. And he worked 20 years, 7 years for Leah, 7 years for Rachel, and then another 6 years to have his livestock. So he spent 20 years of his life indebted to his father-in-law, hard years. And during those years, his mother, he was her favorite, but during those years, his mother died. He did not attend the funeral. He was not there during her last. He lost those years with his family, with his dad, with his mom, and then returns to the promised land. Things seem to be going better, and Joseph is sold by his brothers to a traveling band of Midianite, Ishmaelite traders, and he ends up in Egypt as a slave. And they tell their dad, Jacob, that Joseph is dead. He's been killed by a wild animal, and so he spends those years grieving the death, the loss of his favorite son, thinking that he is dead. And it was at least 22 years by the time the brothers went down there. The first time to get food, it was probably 23 years, if not a little bit more, before Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. So Jacob spent 23 years, give or take, thinking that his son is dead. So the truth is he had a lot of hard years, a lot of challenges. But isn't it also true that some of those was his own fault? The way he treated his brother Esau when they were young, the way he favored Joseph over his other sons, that created the jealousy that Joseph's brothers had toward him in part. That wasn't all of it, but it was part of it. I mean, he created some of his own issues. And the truth is, all of us will face challenges in life. If you live long enough, you will. If you say, my life's not been hard, well, just hang on for a few more years and it will be. That's just how life is. We all have those hard moments. What we don't need to do, okay? Listen, what we don't need to do is what Jacob did and make them harder than they are already going to be by making bad decisions, by being guilty of things that break our relationships. Don't make your life is going to have good moments and beautiful moments. It's going to have hard moments, challenging moments. Don't make it harder than it has to be by being stupid. Don't make it harder than it has to be by making bad decisions, unwise decisions. That's one of the takeaways. But I also want to say this. Through all of those challenges, Jacob never lost his faith in God. And he never lost his belief in the future that God had promised. In Genesis 46 and verse 1, when the brothers come back and tell him, hey, Joseph is alive and he sent all this stuff to help us, and we're going to go down there and live with him so we don't die in this famine. As they left and made their way toward Beersheba on their way to Egypt, rather, Genesis 46:1, the previous chapter says that Jacob stopped and he offered sacrifices to God. You get down to chapter 47, and he's reunited with his son Joseph. And then at the end of the chapter, starting at verse 29, when the time for Israel, Jacob, to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "Please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your right hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness." As a way of signing a contract, making a pledge, and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. And then he said, "Here's what I want you to do. Please, do not bury me in Egypt." Jacob says, "Joseph, please, don't bury me in this country. Don't bury me down here in Egypt. But when I lie down with my fathers, when I die, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." The cave that Abraham bought to bury Sarah and where Abraham was buried. And where Leah was also buried. "Promise me you'll take me back and bury me there." And Joseph said to him at the end of verse 30, "I will do as you have said." And then Jacob said, "Swear to me." And so he swore to him. And then Israel, or Jacob, bowed in worship at the head of the bed. So here he is worshiping again. But it's also significant that he wanted to be buried back in Canaan, in the Promised Land. Not just because that's where his dad and mom and first wife were buried. It's more than that. Canaan was the land of promise. God had said, "I will give to you and to your descendants this land." And Jacob wanting to be buried there was also saying to Joseph and the people, the Jewish people, "I believe in that promise." And that's one of the things I admire about Jacob is through all the stuff that the messes he created, the messes that he did not create, but yet he had to live through all of that, he never lost his belief in the promise of God. He never lost his faith. Once he had that incredible encounter with God at Bethel when he was fleeing from Esau, and he saw that vision of the ladder and angels going up. Once he had that miraculous, incredible encounter with God that changed his life, he never, from that point forward, lost his confidence in God. Kept worshiping, and he believed in the promises of God. And for you and me, we are so blessed. God has given us so many promises. Don't lose your confidence in those promises. Don't lose your faith in God and His Word. No matter the challenges or hardships of your life, never let go of God's promises. What He has promised, He is faithful to fulfill. So don't let go. Jacob teaches us that. Hey, God bless you. Thank you for being with me. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at Genesis 48. And remember, take a moment today and pray for God to show you some people you don't know yet who need to be in a discipleship group with you in 2026. God bless you, everybody.